Today to speak to me. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm really, really well, thank you. Really well. Very warm in here. But yeah, it's really nice. I enjoyed the weekend sun. But yeah, well, basically, the aim of today is just to sort of discuss, yourself and your background, how you got into RPA, and also sort of how we can get more women into RPA or in the tech space. I know we've spoken about that a lot before, so that's sort of going to be the format. If that sounds good to yourself.
Yeah, sounds great.
Perfect. So, well, can you tell us a little bit about how your career to date and how you got to where you are today?
Yes, of course. So I originally started, I am originally a linguist and was in investment banking for about 10 years. And then
Mhm.
about 4 years ago, I decided to really have, well, it's longer ago than that now. It's more like 7 years ago, decided to have a bit of a stint outside of investment banking. I set up
Mhm.
my own consultancy and embarked upon an MBA in technology management. And started really in the RPA space back in 2015. It was a new technology. I'd had
Yeah.
exposure to things like algorithmic trading, so knew what basic automation looked like. But this was a
Mhm.
technology that wasn't just about revenue; it
Yeah.
was about improving operations and processes, and looking at how you can help organisations through technology that's not too technically complex, that you can more easily roll out than other large ERP pieces.
No, fantastic. I mean, and is that and obviously you're now at First Derivatives. Is that are you
Yes.
and you're leading the automation there, aren't you? And is that a new thing for them at First Derivatives, or where are you up to?
Yes, it very much is. So yes, there's been quite a transformation at First Derivatives themselves
Mhm.
actually over the last year or so, and this is a new area for them. So I am building out the practice, the teams, and looking at the service offerings that we provide to clients, listening to a lot of client expectations as well. Obviously, otherwise we're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
And also pulling out a lot of the USPs at First Derivatives that already exist. And really how I suppose my career has evolved over the years. And First Derivatives are a little bit in this situation at the moment as well. I was reminded a few weeks ago, I went to Down House, which my son is very much into history, and we visited Down House, which was Charles Darwin's residence, and all
Yeah.
over the area there were boards stood up with his original quote, and I'm going to have to read it because I can't remember it word by word. So and I was reminded that it is not the strongest that survives, nor the most intelligent, but it is the one that is the most adaptive to change. And that is where I'm at the moment. It's
Yeah.
really how I've evolved my career as well. You need to be constantly evolving, constantly
Mhm.
changing, constantly adapting. Otherwise, organizations are potentially going to get left behind. In financial services, a lot of challenger banks now, there's a lot of fintechs,
Mm.
and you do need to be one step ahead. And RPA, if you have old legacy systems, that can certainly help you improve
Yeah.
your processes from that standpoint.
No, absolutely. I think COVID has taught us that more than anything, that if you can't adapt, then you are going to get left behind for
Mm,
sure.
mm.
Um, and like we read, well, I know that, I've read a lot that 70% of the RPA programs sort of fail initially. Like, do you think that is due to businesses focusing solely on the potential sort of end goal and cost saving instead of focusing like directly on each and every individual automation?
Well, this is quite a contentious one, isn't it, with
Mm.
how we look at this data? I mean, obviously, lots of little automations will all add up, but
Yeah.
there's always a question: is this a finger here, a toe there? If you're looking at tangible cost saves,
Hmm.
I'm often directed for the client to either look at cost saves from that balance sheet standpoint. How is this going to impact our bottom line? Or alternatively, there are other CXOs I work with that are just looking to try it out, just looking to see how they can get efficiency saves. And it's
Yeah.
not, but that is a little bit harder to prove in some respects. So in my experience, and there's an awful lot of statistics out there, it's not just RPA programs that fail. And you know, I would suggest, if you are not looking at that big picture, if you're not being aware that there is an expectation in general in the market for this to have that tangible impact, then you know you are potentially setting yourself up to fail. But there are all kinds of other tools now available as well as RPA that you can add on to your initiative. You can use process mining to be able to assess from a scientific standpoint just where your bottlenecks are in a process. And there are other tools that you can use to have a look at, well, how many times has that system fallen over? How many times has that failed? How many red incidents do we have on that particular system? Because also for RPA, you want to make sure you're not RPAing on a system that's potentially unstable or, you know, is constantly going down.
It's already faulty.
Yeah, so there's an awful lot you can do to be able to assess the viability of that up front. But as I said, if you don't focus on that end goal, you are, in your stakeholders' eyes, you are more likely to fail. And this is where also metrics, you need to be setting, and you need to have an agreement on what the metrics of success are right at the start. Is it about cost saving? Is it about efficiency saves? Is it about providing transparency on the process? Is it adapting to regulatory changes without a large cost? You know, there are all kinds of metrics that you can use to measure their success, and that's where, from your sponsors, from your stakeholders, that's where you get the true value for them.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we've obviously spoken quite a lot previously about how, from my sort of findings of speaking to senior and exec level, you know, RPA leads, lots of those positions are held by men. Do you think that is there better ways to encourage sort of more women into the RPA space, and also just like the tech space in general?
Yes, I think there are. Yes, very much so, of course. And RPA is something I think it naturally, you know, we both have an awful lot of women in our network, still not enough, but it's not an out and out, you know, large, complex technical tool to learn that can sometimes put women off if they're not from that background. You are, at the end of the day, solving for business problems, you know, and you know, there is the ability to go in as an analyst or a process analyst, where you have a mixture of developer and a business analyst skill set, very quickly be able to make a difference to that organization. And you don't need to, you know, I don't have a developer background, I don't have a technical degree background, but then there's other tools as well that I didn't mention before, citizen developer tools, which are you know, which again, you don't need, if you're using true citizen developer tools, and this is also one of our USPs, they are not RPA, because in our experience, you do need to be able to code in RPA. No matter what the vendors might say, you do need to have a developer mindset, a skill set. But there are other tools, true citizen developer tools, that you can use for reconciliations, that you can use for document matching, document ingestion, that can really have that really tangible impact without needing to be a techie. One tool that we used, we were able to ensure that an organization didn't have a 320 million tax liability through using that tool, which, you know, was 25% of their assets under management. And these are tools that a lot of the female consultants in my area can use. You know, they have a little bit of SQL code, but not really in depth. And again, they also at the start, they were, I'm not quite sure about this tool and whether I'm technically adept to be able to use it. But you can get started very, very quickly. I would say, back to the original question, I think we need to really be asking women more, really what they're looking for in roles, and you know, not assuming. I do a lot of these events because I do think women need to see other women in speaking about this. And another key aim here or requirement is to make sure that whenever we're putting job specs together, they are as non-biased as possible. And there's lots of academic research that's been done on this, putting in words like risk taking or aggressive, and and
fast paced, fast moving,
yes, which can potentially put women off. But then
Mm-hmm.
there's, on the flip side of that, we need to be very, very aware of our cognitive biases as well, because some people would consider me to be, I've had my own business. I've done some roles that were potentially quite high risk. We need to also, on the flip side, not assume that every woman will be scared of taking a risk.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, we're not all. It's not that black and white, and neither are men.
No.
So we need to, and what I'm finding at First Derivatives is there is a very strong leadership knowledge of how to lead and mentor women in positions of authority and leadership, and it's a different way of managing and mentoring. I mean, the other aspects are, how much do we need government incentives to, and there are supporters and detractors of that. Some people saying, oh, we shouldn't need metrics to get women in, but the jury's out. But from my standpoint, I think there needs to be more government incentives to get women into these areas. And you just, when I think about some of the mistakes that have been made in my own experience with all male teams, in one particular scenario, we had a chatbot that was developed, and I was testing it out at the time. This is a practical example of where this can go wrong. And I said, oh, I'm feeling a little bit tired today, just to see how it had been trained and what it would respond with.
Yeah.
And it said, oh, you look far too beautiful to need any beauty sleep. And it's scenarios like that where you encounter them first. Obviously, I fed back and the team went away and corrected it and amended it. But it's times like that where the guys have just thought, oh, this would be a bit funny to say. And there's potentially not been enough women in the room, or maybe there were women in the room but didn't have the kind of, I don't know, confidence, or didn't think about, well, this might cause offence. So it's both empowering women to be able to have the confidence to say if they're not quite sure about something, being aware of cognitive biases that you might have, potentially setting metrics, getting government support. If I think about where I went into secondary school, I did a bit of volunteering a few years back. I was asked to go and talk about a career in technology as a woman. And it was a comprehensive school. It wasn't private school. It was mixed, boys and girls. And on my table, I wore something like this to be approachable. And I was really, really shocked at that age. They were 12, 13. Still, I got a couple of girls out of a group of 10 boys that came over to find out what I did. And that was it. So you can see how young
it starts.
Those kind of perceptions start. And I suppose the final thing here I would say is there's a bit of a movement around banning manels. I don't know whether you know what a manel is.
Oh, I don't.
It's an all-male panel.
Right,
so
okay.
You have events that there are only men on the panel, and for some reasons, that there may not be the option, but it's making sure that, as I was saying at the start, women see other women. And as long as these kind of scenarios go on where you've only got men, there's going to be young women in the audience that are sitting there thinking, well, this isn't relevant for me. It's all, what's it mean to me?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's another area where I think that would I know that would encourage more women.
Definitely. No, 100%. And I mean, obviously, whenever I speak to someone on a podcast, I always ask sort of what their one tip would be for anyone sort of starting their RPA journey. So I'll ask you the same question. Is there any particular tip you would say to someone sort of in the beginning of their career with RPA?
Be ready to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, and I have women in my network that they used to work so hard in their early career because they were terrified of making a mistake, and they wanted everything to be absolutely perfect, and there was no room for error. And obviously that has a place in certain environments, but in RPA, it's still pretty emerging. There's no best practice there. So you need to be ready to, if something doesn't work, try again and take that lesson, take that learning and use it on your next engagement, on your next phase of the project, on your next implementation. Read a lot, research a lot, join relevant networks as well. So there's lots of women in RPA networks, and you can get the support there in more of a safe environment as well. Lots of meetups happening. So yeah, network lots, and yeah, be prepared to make some mistakes. There's nothing wrong with them as long as you learn from them.
Exactly. That's how we learn, isn't it? How we learn and how we grow. So I completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for coming on today and taking the time out to speak to me. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
Yes, it's been lovely. It's been really nice. Thank you.
Thanks so much. You take care and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Imogen.